with Carolina Women. I'm sitting with Amy Bowman with State Farm Insurance, and I think it's very apropos to be sitting with you today because we have a hurricane that's coming up, you know, the United States. So it's not hitting us directly, it's Helene, right? Yes. But yet we seem to be having tropical storming warnings and all these things, which I think is befitting to have a conversation about insurance.
Right. Well, the storm season for us, you know, a lot of us in the Lowcountry kind of prepare August time frame, maybe even the beginning of September, thinking this is the time that we're going to see storms, but they actually have the hurricane season to the end of November. So when we had Hurricane Matthew grace our presence in 2016, that actually was on October the 8th. So definitely a good time to talk about staying vigilant and then just understanding some things to do to be prepared.
Well, there's two things specifically I want to talk about. One is, you know, our area is still booming. We have a lot of new homeowners. I want to talk about that. And the other thing I do want to talk about is, you know, when it's happened to me where I've had my flood insurance drop from insurance, they just kind of pull out of the area, and what do you do next? So the first thing let's talk about is being a new homeowner. You know, people don't understand, even from the north, or Ohio, wherever they're coming from, they got to do their due diligence and know understanding where their property is, how close to the water it is, and the flood zone, right?
Flood zone, and just knowing that coastal insurance and even how deductibles work on a traditional homeowner's policy may be very different from what they're used to in more inland areas of the country. We have what we call wind and hail deductibles or hurricane deductibles that may be separate. So just understanding what constitutes flood, what constitutes wind losses, definitely want to be prepared and reach out and shop these rates ahead of time. I would just stress not to wait until we are so close to the closing table to try to focus on, okay, now I've got to think about insurance and I'm closing in a couple of days. Coastal carriers have very strict regulations, and it's always helpful to do your homework ahead of time just to know what not only what your rate's going to be, but if you are required to carry flood or not carry flood, and what that may look like for you.
Well, yeah, I think that's great. I mean, but I'm curious to know, all of a sudden, you know, flood insurance was easy to get, but now it seems only a very few insurance agencies offer it or have the ability to even offer it through, so however your networking is, right?
So flood insurance is a federal policy for most. The National Flood Insurance Program is who I write for in particular. There were some private carriers that wrote what we call privatized flood insurance. That's what you're seeing kind of wane from the market a little bit, but you are eligible to purchase flood through the National Flood Insurance Program. So checking with other carriers or asking the broker that you're with if you can actually have this written directly through the NFIP, you should be able to obtain that flood. It's the privatized flood that we're seeing some carriers no longer writing anymore.
Really interesting. And do you find in this, I mean, we're in Beaufort right now, and this is your territory. Is it pretty much affected by flood? Are you in this whole area, are you close enough to the water where flood is where it's necessary versus being like, you know, 5 miles in, or are you in the flood zone, I guess?
So it's a common myth in some areas that we are not in a flood zone. I will hear that when I have folks come in to look at homeowners insurance and say, you know, I just need the homeowners, I'm not in a flood zone. Every parcel of property here in Beaufort County is zoned for flood. There are some areas that the lender, based on your elevation, requires that you carry flood insurance if you have a loan. But you are in flood zones, either A is an alpha, X is an X-ray, and you still have the ability to look. Rising water is excluded on a homeowner's policy due to flooding, no matter what carrier you're with. So definitely want to do your homework, verify what your zone is, and whether the lender requires it or not. If you choose to carry that policy, you can.
Really, really wise words. So then if you do have a mortgage and all of a sudden that your flood insurance for that mortgage gives you the letter saying we are no longer covering your call you.
Yes, call your insurance agent, see what other options are out there for you.
Because it really is important. It takes your breath away when you get the letter, but it's just more of a pain because you have to now say, okay, where am I going to go find this lender?
Right. You do have options. That's the main thing to know.
Well, Amy, it's so nice to see you and talk to you. Anything else we got to say as we go into the fall, just be patient with the weather?
Be patient with the weather. Know that it's still subject to change. We have the storm season ending officially on November the 30th, so we've got about, 2 months left. So just be vigilant and be prepared.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for all the good information. And I want to thank you for joining us as well, Carolina Women.